Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Morgan. Today, my guest is Colin Shaw of Beyond Philosophy. Colin is a consultant, an author, and a speaker, and we are talking about the state of customer experience. Is Apple product-centric or customer-centric? How about the B2B customer experience world? How does a logistics company like Maersk work on improving their net promoter score by improving the customer experience? Colin and I talk about the state of customer experience today, how some of the macro trends are impacting the customer experience space, and much more. Please enjoy Colin Shaw. Colin, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. Where are you calling in from today in the world?
I'm in sunny Florida, in Sarasota.
Okay, and how long have you lived in Florida?
Well, I actually, as you can tell from my accent, it's not a typical Floridian accent that I have.
No.
So I split my time between England and Florida and go back and forth. So
Sounds
my
wonderful.
family are still in the UK, but my wife and I come here because there is a thing called the sun, which we don't get very
Right.
much in England.
Yes, exactly. Well, yes, it's always balmy in Florida. Um,
It is.
let's let's talk about, I mean, you've been doing this work. You've been in the customer experience world for a really long time. Let's talk about how you got started and why these topics spoke to you originally.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say I was in it before it even became a thing. So it was an interesting concept at the time. So it all started when I was back in corporate life, and I was working for British Telecom, which is the equivalent of working for AT&T here. Um, and my boss said something to me. I don't think he necessarily understood what he was saying, to be totally honest with you. But he said he would like to improve the customer experience and do it at least cost. And this was back at literally the turn of the century. So I'm now making myself very old, aren't I? Um, and so we spent sort of 3 years trying to work out what the hell a customer experience was. Everyone at that point was talking CRM, and nobody was really talking customer experience. So after that experience, I thought this was going to be a thing. So took a gamble, left corporate life, and started my own company, Beyond Philosophy. Wrote a book, written seven since then, and the rest is history, as they say.
So, what do you find that from the year 2000? I mean, obviously, customer experience has grown by leaps and bounds. Now everybody's talking about it. Back then,
Yep.
only a few people were talking about it. What do you think some of the differences are when you tell people, like at a Thanksgiving, when you're in America at a dinner party, what you do now versus if you were to tell them I work in customer experience back in the year 2000?
Um, So if you're in business, you understand it a bit better. I probably spent the first, so I started off by myself in 2002. I probably spent the first 3 years just explaining to people what in the hell customer experience was because nobody knew what it
Right.
was. And they mistook it for customer service, which I think is sort of, if you're a layman, i.e., you don't really are not in business, then you still consider customer experience and customer service the same type of thing. But as we know, they're different. Um, and so I think that's the main aspect. I think that the other interesting bit is that I've been doing this so long now. You can see history repeating itself, which is also quite interesting. And there's some change happening and all the rest of it, which I think is uh, it replicates what was happening back in 2002. To be totally honest with you.
Okay, so there's so much change. I mean, what are you hearing out there from your clients right now about some of the challenges that they're struggling with?
I think one of the big challenges is just the usual challenges that have been around for some time. Siloed organization, people in customer experience being given responsibility without being given authority, looking at trying to understand what the ROI is. I mean, all you've got to do is you know that we have a podcast called The Intuitive Customer, and we had on. I'm sure you've looked at this. The American Customer Satisfaction Index,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and that's been going for virtually, well, in fact, about 4 years longer than we have. And the interesting thing from that is that we're now at a 17-year low. Okay,
Right.
so which I find shocking, to be honest with you.
Are you
So
shocked?
given all of the effort that everyone's been putting into improving the experience and all the money and all the new systems that have been purchased, voice of the customer, et cetera, to actually say that it's a 17-year low, I find quite incredible. And when you then take a step back and you go, well, yeah, but that's just down to COVID. What you discover is it's not. Between 2010 and 2019, these are their stats and these are their facts. Um, they will tell you that only a third of organizations actually improved their experience. So, whilst a lot of attention has been paid to customer experience, there's not a lot of real progress or as much progress as I would like to have seen happen. And I think that goes back to some of the things I was just talking about, siloed, lack of responsibility, no ROI for the programs. And now, as we enter a whole age of AI and stuff like that, it's going to be fascinating where it all goes.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that the competition to just turn the profit has gotten really out of control where they're cutting costs at every turn and just the
Yeah,
pressure
yeah,
more with
no,
less?
yeah, I do, and that's always been around. Um, that's sort of to a certain extent nothing new. I remember when I was back at BT, and I put this big business case together. So I used to run the call centers and stuff like that. So I had 3,500 people working for us, and we put this big bid together, this big proposal together. We'd got a budget, and of how we were going to improve the experience. Went to the finance group because they needed to sign it off, and um, basically told them how much it was going to improve the customer experience by, and they refused to do it because it wasn't going to cut costs. Went
Hmm.
back to the office 3 months later, spent 3 months on looking at how we can actually equate this to saving money. Went back and presented effectively the same thing, but because we framed it as we could save money, yeah, it got through. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are today, is that too many organizations, for me, it's that bit about a leopard doesn't change its spots. In the good days, you hear a lot of people talk about why customer experience is important, and how they're committed to it. But as soon as the bad times hit, then they run a mile and start cutting costs again. And again, my worry is that with AI around the corner, then that's just going to be used as another tool to cut costs. Undoubtedly, it will cut costs, but for me, some of that money should be being reinvested in improving the experience.
So you are a speaker and you share content about what good companies are doing. What are a couple of the companies that you think are doing a great job with customer experience you could share with my audience?
Yeah, I think some of those are sort of the usual suspects. One of the ones I like the best is Apple,
Mhm.
just because of the integrated nature of them. Although having said that, I actually went down to the Apple store to buy a new computer the other day and had a really bad experience. But I won't bore you
Yeah.
with that.
No, I mean, no, to stop you there, I heard something interesting because there's a debate now that Apple, while they are their products are incredible, I wouldn't say they are, I would argue they are not customer centric as far as the service experience. I have not found to be very people centric because I have recently run into quite a lot of problems with
Yeah,
their insurance providers. They don't share data with the Philippines contact center that does their, like, if you damage or lose your phone. And I found I had a lot of problems with Apple, and that was disappointing to me because I always talk about how amazing they are. But even Apple,
Yeah.
one of the world's most beloved brands, I think gets it wrong sometimes.
Yeah, no, I mean, undoubtedly they do. And, give you an example then. For yesterday, I went down to buy a new computer and I couldn't book online to get an appointment. Walked into the store, said I want to buy a new computer. The woman told me that I had to wait an hour, or I could come back and they could book it online.
Hmm.
I couldn't book it on an appointment online. They could, but they could only book it for the next day, and I was busy, and therefore I wanted it for the day after, and they couldn't do that, which I
That's so
found
interesting. So
quite
you
annoying.
walk into a store and they're too busy to sell you something.
I tell you, what, the place was rammed,
That's
and
amazing.
this was literally yesterday. No, Monday. I tell a lie. So 2 days ago, and it was rammed on a Monday afternoon. And I went down there Monday afternoon on purpose because I thought I'm not even going to try to do this at the weekend. So, is there any organization that gets it 100% right? Then no.
Hmm.
Um, but I think the way that Apple integrate things, and I think the way that they look at things, certainly for me, it helps looking at things globally. So I can buy something here and then take it back to an Apple store. I was in New Zealand. We were on vacation, and my wife's computer went, and we took it back into in Auckland in New Zealand, and they helped us. So I think that sort
Hmm.
of level of integration. But I do worry. It worries me again if I go back in history. Um, Back in the day, I used to love Sony, and I bought everything Sony. This is before
Right.
Apple came about, and I I hate them now.
You hate
Um,
them.
well, hate is probably too strong a word, but I don't buy any products from them at all.
Hmm.
The last one I bought was a TV, which has just blown up over the last 2 weeks.
Oh,
And it's just made me go, I'm just not going to deal with them anymore. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think everything and everyone goes through this bell curve of transition. I don't think that, do I think that Apple are going to be on top of their game for, the next 20 years? Probably not. And I'll probably end up being exactly where I've got to with Sony. I think people get to a point where they become too complacent, and it eventually starts coming down the other side.
I actually have a quote that I was just looking at the other day from Tim Cook, which is that if you want to take all of the credit, you need to first take responsibility.
Yeah,
However, from a service perspective, I think you're right. Like they have so many customers more than they know what to do with. At the same time, maybe they are moving too quickly and they need to understand we're all in the people business. And if you make
sure.
people feel like you're not going to help them or they're not important because there's 20,000 more of you right behind, like that's a problem. And that was my experience recently with Apple, where they think they're helping customers by having these data laws, but I ran into quite a lot of trouble with data with my own products when I tried to get something fixed through Apple Insurance and then go to the
Sure.
retail store and then call Apple Care and then back to insurance. And everyone was like playing hot potato. It's like, oh, you got to call
Yeah.
this one. Okay, no, call that one. No, call insurance. Call Apple Care. Call
Yes.
the store. And it was just really
Yeah.
strange to me. I'm like thinking, where's Tim Cook?
Sure. Yeah. No. I agree. I think that the sad thing is that when you compare them to lots of other companies, it's just so much worse in other organizations.
True, true.
Um, and when I was looking at Amazon today, and in England they're going to start a trial of this drone, you know, um, delivery by drone within an hour.
Oh, wow.
And you go onto other websites and they're not even delivering something within 5 days. So the expectation level is just so much higher. But I think the other thing that they do, along with Google and Amazon, etc., is they do look at this whole area that you'll know that we're into of this behavioral science. So trying to understand people at a much deeper level. than just that sort of surface level. And I think they can get caught up in that, but I think that they do try to understand people in a at a deeper level.
Absolutely. It's interesting to think about brands. So you mentioned that Apple, they obviously their products are amazing. Like I complain, but I'm a big customer. I've got the watch.
Sure,
I'm using a Mac right now. Obviously, my
sure.
iPhone I can't live without. What are some other brands that, I mean, maybe somebody we haven't heard of, or B2B that you think do one thing really well, and what is it that they do really well?
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously got the Disneys of this world. The one I would refer to is there's a company that we did a lot of work with called Maersk Line. Okay,
Hmm.
now Maersk are the largest container shipping company in the world.
Yeah,
Okay, and you will undoubtedly have driven past Maersk container ships on the highway and stuff like that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and I think the thing that really surprised me with them is that they are very much because they're into container ships, they're very much into logistics.
Hmm.
And obviously trunking a container from one place to another. And they very much got into that more emotional side of an experience. So using that as part of their strategy and training their people up on how to identify which emotions customers are feeling, and then being able to effectively understand how they're feeling and convert them into what you want them to feel. So they put a whole training program in place to do that. And that had a big effect on their net promoter score, but that went up by about 40 points over a 30-month period.
Can I
So,
ask you what you did for them? What they asked you for your help with?
yeah. So one of the first things that we do is we ask a pretty basic question, which I literally asked when I was when my boss said, "Could you improve the experience and do it at least cost?" Um, which is, what's the experience you're trying to deliver? Okay, so can you articulate the experience to me that you want a customer to go away and, what would they say about you? And not just what I would call the rational things. So not just, well, they deliver on time, um, you know, um, I like the prices. Those are for me rational things. It's more of those sort of emotional things. So, what would you want your customer to say they feel about you? So, in other words, things like trust or cared for. So, one of the things that we did was um, we helped them set the strategy, okay,
Hmm.
and help them define what the experience was that they're trying to deliver. And we ended up with trust, cared for, and pleased. So we want our customers to trust us, we want our customers to feel cared for, and we want them to feel pleased. And the reason that we picked them, which goes on to the sort of second thing that we did, that we typically do, it is to define what drives value. So we can prove through one of our services um, that, if you evoke trust or feeling cared for or pleased or improve your delivery, then you're going to get this, X amount of revenue improvement in net promoter, whatever it may be. And the reason we do that is to effectively, with a company like Maersk and various other organizations we've worked with, they want some science behind it. They want some numbers behind it rather than just going, yeah, that sounds a good idea. We'll do it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
evidence. So once you then got that strategy in place and you could prove that actually it will return value, it's then trying to work out with the teams what, how do you evoke, how do you make a customer feel trust? How do
Right.
you make a customer feel cared for? Yeah. And what is it that you should do and what is it that you shouldn't do to make them feel those ways? So that gets down to a bit of our company name, which is Beyond Philosophy. So I guess the strategy is the philosophy, and the beyond it is going, okay, well, what do we get people in the call center to do, or how do we set up a website, to evoke those feelings and make sure that we're moving away from the negative feelings that we're evoking at the moment.
You wouldn't
So
think that mayors would need to care about client emotion since they're a B2B logistics firm. Like it's
yeah,
not like
and
a person with an iPhone that's broken. It's a decision maker trying to move a large amount of product across the world.
yeah, and therein lies probably the most common question I get, which is, and when I was back at BT, I was in the business to business world, primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the most common question I get is, do emotions, customer emotions apply in the business to business world?
Mm-hmm.
And clearly the answer is yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, I normally say as long as they're human beings, then it absolutely applies. Um, and the reality is that the strange thing is that, in the business to business world, everybody talks about the importance of a relationship, and having a relationship with their customers is key, but they never really sort of realize that what that goes down to then is that human emotion. And that sort of then, for me, the interesting part for me then has become over the last 10, 15 years, has been, well, and getting into this behavioral science bit, which is, well, what causes an emotion? So, you know, and then what we discover is that what customers say to you and what customers do can be different things.
Mm-hmm.
So my famous example is Disney know that when they ask their customers what they want to eat at a theme park, Disney know that people say they'd like to have an option of a salad. Disney also know that people don't eat salads at theme parks. They eat hot
I
dogs and
do.
hamburgers.
I'll tell you, I do. And when I went to Disney, I did not.
Right?
The food was horrible and it was so
Yeah.
expensive.
Yes. Well, so the point is that what people say and what they do can be very different things.
But even
And
a
what you
company like Disney, there are outliers, like me and my family eat very healthy. And I find
Yes,
at places like that, there's literally like nothing I want to eat.
sure,
Even if you're to get a turkey sandwich, it's very expensive and it doesn't
sure.
taste good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And all that says is segmentation. You can't apply
I think
one
there's
thing
no
to,
money in it for them, or else they would have better food. Like it's like the airport. When you go to the airport, unless you go to like a very nice new airport like SFO, the food
sure,
is usually there's just not much that you can eat for me, but I don't eat like fried food. I guess I'm an
sure.
outlier in America, but people do want fresh, healthy food,
Well, yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that.
especially
I've
business
I've
travelers.
recently I've recently become a vegetarian myself because my
Oh,
kids are my kids are vegan, so they've browbeaten me into becoming a vegetarian.
so you know what it
So
is to be kind of
yes,
picky about your food.
absolutely. But we're in a smaller segment than somebody that wants to go in and eat a steak, basically.
Well, now there's a
And
lot more though. I was a vegetarian in like
yeah, yeah,
2002 when you were
yes,
just left BT. And let me tell you, I always cook my own food. But now there's always a vegetarian option at the restaurants, at least where I
yes,
live in
no, and
California though.
yeah, and I would imagine California is better than it is, elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, my daughter's 30 odd now, and she turned vegetarian when she was about 12. So we've seen a lot of change, in the diet in the States. I have to say it's
Mhm.
still not as good as the UK, and that's still not as good as the Far East in terms of what people eat and stuff like that.
Probably has to do
But
with
yeah,
the
it is.
the people though. Like in the UK, I think there's a lot of people from India, like people that I think Hindu, you don't eat meat. I mean, I'm not positive on that, but also like the population and their
Sure.
habits.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's what you're brought up on, and I think that it's a generational thing as well. I mean, as I
Mhm.
said to you, um, my kids are vegans, and that it seems to be much more common with them. But again, what are we talking about? We're talking about segmentation, basically. So you can't please all the people all the time.
But if
You
you
know,
can, you will never be without a customer.
no, that's very true. But most people's segmentations is pretty poor. When
Agreed.
you go into a client and you say, well, what type of customers you got, particularly in the B2B field, and they go, well, we got big customers, we got small customers, and we got medium customers,
Right.
and you think to yourself, well,
You said you have to say, you didn't tell me what they eat for lunch. Are they vegetarian? Well, we're already starting to get to know you a little bit, Colin, but let's get to know you with some rapid fire questions. Does that sound fun?
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. All right. First question, Colin. What show are you currently streaming?
Yellowstone.
So good. Love it.
Hmm.
What season are you on?
I think we're only on season 2.
Oh, so lucky.
Yeah,
Such a good
we
show.
can't get it we don't get it in England, so I can only watch it when I'm here.
Well, I got to stay here then. Next question. If you could have lunch with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Um, Probably Winston Churchill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite type of vacation?
Some form of doing something in a completely different new place that's active. I hate sitting just on a beach, so I have to be doing something.
Mm-hmm. Love that. And what's one leadership hack that helped get you to where you are today?
There's a very good book called The 1 Minute Manager, which
Mm-hmm.
talked about situational leadership, um, which basically talks about what's called the readiness of the follower. Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard of this book title. It sounds amazing. I think I will pick
Yeah.
it up. What's
So
the
so
concept?
basically, so the concept is that, for instance, there would be, if I was your boss, there would be no point in me telling you how to run a podcast because you know how to run a podcast. Okay. So your level of knowledge is high. So it's basically, the concept is, without going through the whole thing, is that you have to adopt your leadership style based upon the follower and their knowledge, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and their aptitude and what they're good at and what they're not good at. So the way that I would treat a new recruit and the way I would treat a seasoned recruit have to be very different to motivate them, basically.
So smart. I think that's really, really on point. What do you do to relax at the end of a hectic day?
I like fishing. So
Oh,
I go, we have a
wait a
lake
minute.
outside, and
You said are you a pescatarian? You eat
yes,
fish?
yes.
Okay,
But
got it.
but here's the interesting thing is, I don't kill the fish that I catch. I throw it back in the pond because my daughter doesn't like me doing that, so I don't do it.
You're
I just
such
go
a
down to
nice
public
dad.
and buy some.
Such a nice dad. Okay. What's the most important part of your morning routine?
Uh, I've learned over the years that I work best in the mornings. So consequently, if I've got something difficult to do, I normally allocate the first couple of hours to think things through, and
Mhm.
then my energy wanes as the day goes on.
Absolutely. And what is your life motto in 3 words, would you say?
In 3 words, um,
In a few words, you can tell me how.
yeah. There's a phrase that I particularly like, which is, none of us are as clever as all of us,
Mm-hmm.
which tries to indicate that um, I don't know the answers to everything, and therefore you have to build a team around you to get to the best answer. And it just because I'm the boss doesn't mean to say that I know the answer to everything. I don't.
Got it.
And you can get collaboration from lots of different sources and get to a much better result if you just let your ego go.
I love that. That's so great. And where can people learn more about you if they want to connect?
I would suggest that they go to LinkedIn and just search for my name, or go to our website, which is beyondphilosophy.com.
Perfect.
Beyondphilosophy.com.
Perfect. Well, it's been so fun chatting with you, Colin. I hope you'll come back and we'll talk more about all these great ideas around customer experience. And I'll probably run into you at a customer experience conference soon. I hope
I'm
so.
sure. Great. Okay. Thanks a lot, Blake.
Everybody, you've been tuning into the Modern Customer Podcast. Thank you for watching. Until next time.